Hello, welcome to Triggered Care. I am Alex, and today I'm going to be talking about epiphanies and how they hurt sometimes. The first time I kind of mentioned epiphanies in general was in my early recovery for CPTSD video that I made a few months back. So if you want to check that out, go for it. But let's get into it. So what am I talking about when I talk about epiphanies? I'm talking about making a significant realization that changes your perspective about something that happened in the past. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about epiphanies here today. Getting diagnosed with PTSD was kind of my first real big epiphany that I had about my mental health. Realizing that I had gone through trauma, that I had lived through something that could be considered trauma, was a huge epiphany for me. And I think it is for a lot of people, especially abuse survivors. That epiphany doesn't come until adulthood. Because for the most part, no one wants the title of victim when you loathe yourself, doubt yourself, feel shame and guilt all the time. You don't feel like you really have a victim status, and you don't really want a victim status. When it first happens, it can feel like you're being dramatic, or like you're going insane, or like your brain is on repeat. The moment of that epiphany for you, the moment of realization, is seared into your thoughts, along with the memories that would go with it. It feels unnatural and uncomfortable sometimes to make epiphanies like that. It makes you obsess and try to avoid it. Whenever it pops up into your head, you try to shove it away, because it's too hard to deal with some of these memories that we hadn't thought about since it happened. And that's the beauty of repression, is when you repress something, sometimes it's not completely blacked out. It's just your brain refuses to think about it. And that's very unhealthy to do, is try to repress it. And I have fallen into that trap many times. And once we get past the initial shock and the confusion and our brain trying to deny it, that's when I, or people in general, will start research and find support groups. And then that will bring you some validation for your epiphany that you had. And it's not necessarily a good or bad feel. It's both. It's both good and bad. It comes with some sense of relief, like it's not my fault. Constant struggle to accept for a while that it's not your fault. And it's like a battle is going off in your brain. The old foundations of your brain will fight this new information because you were trained to fight this information. You were brainwashed to believe that you were not good enough. So how could this be true? How could you be a victim of anything? And it comes along with a lot of emotion to process. Especially for childhood abuse survivors, that's a lot of repressed emotion that all of a sudden we have to face and deal with, and that is a very daunting feeling. Some feelings that come along with it: you get sad, you get angry, there's some relief for knowing what happened in a logical sense, in a rational sense, but it also comes along with shame and guilt, because it does feel almost like a betrayal to your abusers, who, if you don't know that you were abused, those are family members, those are close loved ones, whoever it may be who abused you in the past, coming to the realization that that behavior wasn't acceptable and that behavior was toxic and hurtful to you is really hard. It's really hard coming to that conclusion and accepting it. Talking to survivors, I realized a lot of them have the same big epiphany that I'm talking about, usually in adulthood, about their traumas being real and that what they went through was actually a trauma, which can come to a surprise to them. Nobody grows up thinking they're abused. Like, their abusive home is their normal. So telling them, hey, that's not normal, and that's actually really messed up, shakes a person's brain a bit and makes everything change. But change is still scary, no matter which direction it's going, especially for somebody who has a mental illness. Change can be terrifying. So it's like a really hard but beautiful thing that you have to go through. The relief is beautiful. The feeling like it's not all your fault finally after all those years is nice. But it's not just that. It's also realizing how long you were kind of in a brainwashed mentality against yourself and realizing that somebody provided you the blueprints to do that. That's going to bring some anger and sadness up. If a rape survivor froze or had a fawn reaction to their attacker during the rape, they'll rarely consider it rape. They will put the blame on themselves. They don't teach us about other types of survival responses in school. They don't teach us about it at all. So movies portray rape as a woman screaming and kicking, and if it's not like that, then for some odd reason society doesn't think that it's a rape. So victims can't scream. Like, some people, when they're being attacked, their survival reaction is to not make noise or to play dead or to freeze up, almost like you're in a paralysis. And so they don't register that they were raped until much, much later. And I've actually had a few friends, sadly, that this has happened to. And I'll talk to them about my own experiences with rape. And then they'll tell me, well, I wasn't raped, but this happened. And then it just breaks my heart because I'm like, dear heart, that was against your consent. You were frozen scared. That still counts as rape. Just because you don't scream during it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And that sort of epiphany for people is really, really rough. And it causes flashbacks that you want to avoid and like karate chop away from your brain. Like, no, don't bother me. Don't think about it. I'm being dramatic. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. Which is a very common survivor reaction to being told that they are a survivor of something. If a child is taught that beatings only happen to bad children, they will believe it. Once again, nothing in school teaches us or teaches children to identify abuse tactics and report it if it's happening to them. They grow up believing they deserved it until they learn that it wasn't their fault. Usually not until adulthood, if they chose to go through therapy or if they chose to actually go talk to a professional about it. And these are some of my hardest epiphanies that I had to go through. And it's still hard sometimes for me not to blame myself. And I've been in recovery for a number of years now. And it's still a struggle sometimes to not feel the shame and the doubt and to call myself dramatic and to discredit myself and my feelings because I'm so used to doing it. It is still a tiny part of my foundational brain to do that, because it was wired in very, very deeply. These epiphanies about abuse, they're life-changing. And in the long term, they're life-changing in a good way. That means you are making progress. You are applying logic and reason to your life the way it should be applied. The sad and angry part of it is short term. It makes you miserable. It causes flashbacks, usually a big boatload of them all to come at once, or the same horrific flashback to come over to your brain again and again. So during the times that you're going through an epiphany like that, please remember to be nice to yourself and to be forgiving to yourself. And remember that when you think, oh, I'm just being dramatic, you're not being dramatic. You're not. Those are your abuser's voice stuck in your head telling you so. That is the brainwashing at work. And it is not reliable, and it is not reasonable, and it is not logical. So, I just wanted to do a little blurb about that. All the links for stuff are down below. You got the resources down there, the Discord, and there's 2 Discords, the CPTSD one and the PTSD one, along with the email in case you want to email me your story. I mean, I could make a video about it, but if you just want to email me and talk, that's more than fine too. So, I hope everybody's Monday started out good, and I hope you have a good one.